Ottoman period. Yes. Yes, DJ çevirecek. Evet. Çevirdin mi?
Ama seninki de sen çevir.
Ha, tamam. Peki. There are 4 surgical manuscripts written with Arabic alphabet, but in Turkish. And during the 14th and 15th and 16th centuries, there are, of course, much more manuscripts on medicine, since surgical skill was acquired through master apprenticeship method. When we look about the names of the Turkish surgical instruments, we see that there are 21 names that are single word, and there are 24 that are a word group, and these refer to the function of the tool, like bone piercing instrument. Well, what are the origins of these surgical instruments terminology? 44 names are Turkish in origin, 27 Arabic, 7 Persian, and 3 are of Greek origin. We can say that the instruments that are named in Turkish were known and used by Ottoman surgeons. Sabuncuoğlu is the most famous surgeon of the classical Ottoman period, and he described about 168 surgical instruments, but we do not have any surgical instruments that survived until today, no examples in our hand. This is a list of the general names of the surgical instruments that take place in Turkish surgical texts. We will see them shortly, one by one. There is the great difficulty in defining surgical instruments that are illustrated and described in manuscripts. One reason is that they are schematic drawings, and there's a problem with the different copies. Although the names and descriptions of the surgical instruments are usually the same, they could be depicted differently in different copies. So sometimes the figures do not meet the definitions exactly. This is a great problem. This is why I prepared this presentation. Sabuncuoğlu was a very master surgeon, and the illustrations we find in his manuscript contribute to the recognition of surgical instruments. Though he mainly followed Zehravi's surgical text, he just didn't copy the figures, but possibly he drew these himself, or maybe, I think he drew them himself, but maybe he described it to an artist. And we can see that the main goal of these drawings is to be understood and to be instructive. So when we start to classify these tools according to their shapes as well as their names, we see that though he was faithful to the text, the types of the tools he illustrated are found to be suitable for the described surgical intervention. In shortly, he drew what he knew what he drew because he used them. Though many sketches in Tasrif's copies are puzzling, and sometimes we cannot correspond them with the descriptions in the text, and sometimes we can understand how these instruments were employed. They're not very clear. When we start to compare Sabuncuoğlu's drawings and Tasrif copies' drawings, we can provide much more reliable results in defining these instruments. Now, since I have very little time, I will go very fast. First, we will talk about the types of cautery. And in each of my slides, you will see first the English term for the surgical instrument, and in the parentheses you will see the Turkish names given in surgical texts. We see that these cauteries, these different kinds of cauteries are included in all the surgical texts, and this is a list of the names. The all-over cautery, as you can see, was drawn, illustrated in miniature pictures. And as you can see from at the right side, I studied 4 manuscripts of tasrif and the 4 different copies of instruments. But since I don't have much place for them, I usually I'm going to show you those which were published by Spink and his friend. The most important thing is that the illustrations of Sabuncuoğlu are always consistent with each other. The 2 main copies, which was written by himself, are the same. There's a 3rd copy, which was copied about 250 years later. Then all the shapes of the instruments were spoiled because they were copied by someone who did not probably practice surgery. So as you can see on the right side, it is the same Oliver cautery, though drawn differently. And this is the claviform bowl-shaped cautery. And if you look at the right side, you cannot really decide which kind of instrument this is. But if you study Sabuncuoğlu illustrations, you can see that there is a knob at the middle of all the drawings. The head is nail-shaped. And this is the bladed T-shaped knife cautery. And still you see the consistency and the different types of drawings at the right side. This is the pointed cautery. The pointed cautery is really practiced like moxibustion, just to stimulate that point. This is the lenticular cautery. For instance, there is no drawing in tasrif. At least I couldn't find it. We find it in Sabuncuoğlu. This is the crescentic cautery. As you can see, it's always the same in Sabuncuoğlu, while on the right side you see the different forms. All of Sabuncuoğlu's are bent instruments. This is the needle or probe cautery. There's no drawing in tasrif. Then there's a probe enclosed in a cannula. As you can see, it is very easy to understand how this instrument was used if you study Sabuncuoğlu's text on the left side. This is the hollow cautery, and the Sabuncuoğlu depicts them. This is the trident cautery. As you can see on the left side, Sabuncuoğlu miniature paintings are still consistent, but on the right side you can see very, very different forms drawn by the copiers. There's a great variety, and the points spread like fingers. It's really hard to understand how this kind of cautery could have been employed. This is the circular plate cautery and broad ring cautery. Then when we have a look at the piercing surgical instruments, these are included in all of the 4 surgical manuscripts, and this is a list of the general names. When we look at the needle, at the left side we see the needle, and at the right side we see the needle-like probe. As you can see on the right side, there are handles, and below at the right side, they look like curved, slender scalpels, not like the needle-like probe. This is the exploring needle. The sharp points are half-shaped in tasrif copies, while it's triangular and arrow-shaped, pointed in Sabuncuoğlu. This is the couching needle. You can see the similarities and the differences, and this is the drill. The drill is in tasrif is triangular and sharp at the point, while it's quite different in Sabuncuoğlu. This is a slender piercing lancet. As you can see, they do not resemble each other. Then let's have a short look at the surgical cutting instruments, and there's a list of these instruments. Usually there are 4 kinds of cutting instruments. One is straight, the other is bellied, the third one is pointed, and the fourth one is curved. And here you can see the scalpels used by Sabuncuoğlu in the miniature paintings, the different kinds, the straight, the curved, and the pointed. And this is very interesting. This is the bellied scalpel, which we know from the antique period. It's very interesting that a picture of this bellied scalpel does not exist in Tasrif, though it is described, and we can find the shape very similar to those of the antique instruments in Sabuncuoğlu. The knife-shaped scalpel, the illustrations and the copies are quite different. A very fine, sharp, curved scalpel, curved blender scalpel. As you can see, the differences, quite different. The same blade, but quite different drawings. Very fine, smooth-tipped scalpel. For instance, the same blade here is drawn in 4 different shapes, while Sabuncuoğlu's are similar. Sharp, 2-edged, fine, narrow scalpels, all alike. Sabuncuoğlu's are all alike, while the drawings of the different shapes of the same knife in Tasrif is quite different. Spike-shaped knives, you can see that, for instance, it's like a guesswork. The artist probably who copied it did not know anything about this knife, and so it does not correspond with the spike-shaped knife. And it does not have a special name in Tasrif. This is the oliveri scalpel. It is not oliveri in it is shaped, the double-edged surgical knife, the lancet, the thruster midfa. As you can see, the two are very different. The two-ended scalpels, you can see the differences. Lentil-shaped blades, there's no illustration in Tasrif. A small chisel, you can see that they resemble each other but not the same. And here is the pickaxe-shaped lancet. As you can see, Tasrif differs quite from the one of Sabuncuoğlu, which are all consistent. Broad scalpel and the scarificator and the razor. This razor is described in all surgical manuscripts. Blade between 2 plates, as you can see on the left side, you can understand what kind of a blade it is, though in Tasrif it is quite puzzling because it's not depicted well. The hidden thin knife, pointed fine scissors, as you can see, it's always recurved. Blades are never curved in Sabuncuoğlu. There are curved blades in Tasrif, and also there's below on the right side there's an extra ring. We don't know what it's for. You can see the differences between the 2 manuscripts. Left Sabuncuoğlu, right Tasrif. And these are the pincers, forfex with scissor handles, much more descriptive. Hook scalpel and sickle blade, and the saw, probe-like saw, firm bow saw, then the osteotome and the lenticular chisel. Then let's have a short look at the scraping tools. There are various shapes of scrapers. We can find it on all of the Turkish surgical manuscripts. And we see the pictures all together here. On the right side, there are the serrated handles in Tasrif. It's really hard to understand how it was employed. Flat scraper and small scraper. Forked scraper used as a lever and hooked scraper. Fine scraper, bent scraper. Scraper with concavity, and other scrapers, and the respiratory, and the file. The file has a special name in Turkish, though it is not specially named in Tasrif. As you can see, the illustrations in Tasrif are quite different from each other. Vectus or lever, this resembles a crowbar, and as you can see, again in Tasrif there are different shapes. Small lever. And let's look at the hooks. It's used as a pair of forceps. And in these miniature pictures, you can see the hook and scalpel used all together. This is the simple hook and the blunt hooks. It's really hard to understand the handles like this, how they were employed. A double hook. The hook ends curve away from each other. It's really hard to understand it. And this is a guarded triple hook. Again, the hook ends curved away from each other like fingers. And the tweezers of tasrif is really art, does not resemble tweezers. The forceps, the tooth forceps, and the crusher, the cephalotribe, as you can see, very different. For instance, in the millet copy, there is no pivot. The painter did not see the importance of it, probably. The cannula tube and probe cautery, you can understand how it's used from Sabuncuoğlu. This is a tool resembling a fine section of reed. The left side, Sabuncuoğlu, can be understood very well. It reflects the description in tasrif. The catheter and the funnel with a plunger, as you can see, for instance, the end of the instrument is closed on the right side. This is from the millet copy, but it is a funnel. It must be open. This is a fine funnel and tube of a surgical drain. The ones below are from tasrif. They're really hard to understand. So when we finish this, last of all, I would like to tell you about the fact that there is a possibility of a number of different surgical instruments which might have been used by Ottoman surgeons, which have not been illustrated in these surgical manuscripts. I can give you two examples. One is the bullet extractor. Why did it not exist in copies of Zehravi's tasrif? Because there was no bullet used in wars in his time, and the clamp. And this is named Burgi with a central screw. It's very interesting. It says, insert the tip of the tool into the wound. When the tip reaches the bullet at the top of the instrument, is rotated and the bullet is pulled out. So then you remove it with a çifte. It is a forceps. And last, I will show this illustration from Della Croce's surgical book, which depicts the Ottoman Turkish surgery at the battlefield. And in the front, you can see a screw-type bullet extractor used by the Ottoman surgeons. So this proves that it was probably used by the Ottoman surgeons, though not depicted in surgical manuscripts. Thank you very much for listening to me.